China's expansionism is finding new territories and unfriending newer countries now. Tajikistan, one of the smaller Central Asian countries, has been worried since Chinese official media has repeatedly said in the past week that Pamir Mountains should be ceded to China. An article by a Chinese historian using Chinese sources says that the entire Pamir region belonged to China and should be returned, while the apparent official endorsement has worried the government in Dushanbe. Reports say that the development has even drawn attention in Russia, which considers the Central Asian countries to be part of its strategic backyard. China and Tajikistan signed a boundary agreement in 2010 when Tajikistan was forced to cede about 1,158 square kilometers of its territory in the Pamirs to China. Well, China is building an airport at Tashkurgan near the Tajikistan-Afghanistan border that is now a growing cause of concern as well. Well, the nuisance of China. How much do we talk about it every day? There is a new thing which emerges. What should be done of China? We'll talk about this with our esteemed panelists. And joining me on the show is Ambassador Deepak Bora, former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs, and former diplomat. Major General Shashi Asthana, former Additional DG, Infantry, Global Strategic and Defense Analyst. Sumit Peer, political analyst, also joins us on the broadcast. Ambassador Bora, I'll begin by asking you a very simple question. It seems that China is still living in the past. It's still, in fact, trying to reaffirm, reinvigorate, regalvanize its past glory because, according to this historian, on the basis of which the Chinese government is acting, this land belonged to China somewhere in the 19th century. We have tons of documents which can dig up a lot of our assets around the world. Isn't this insane? Isn't this ludicrous, first of all?
Thank you very much, Mr. Malhotra, for this opportunity to interact with such bright minds and learn from them. You're absolutely right. When a country is in decline, it reverts to what we call atavism, thinking of some past glorious era and trying to recreate that. In this particular instance of Tajikistan, of which the capital, as you rightly said, is Dushanbe, remember that it's a resource-poor agricultural state dependent on remittances from Russia. Not too long ago, there were riots there over housing and youth unemployment, which, by the way, is around 30%. I've been there several times. I've served in 3 countries of the former Soviet space as ambassador: Georgia, Armenia, and Lithuania. So the first thing here, when you say give me half of the roof of the world, the Pamirs, that's the old Farsi translation, the first person to get angry is the Russians. Hey, buddy, this is my near abroad. Get lost. Don't you mess around over here. Otherwise, I'll clobber you. The second thing, sir, that is very, very important. The Chinese, why do many countries, not just Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, why do many countries accept assistance from China? Following their independence, of course, the Central Asians came in the 1990s, but all across Africa in the 1960s, for 50 years, they were dependent on the Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank, the IMF, bilateral donors, etc. And these people put all kinds of conditionalities. It was humiliating. They had advisors, they had they had consultants, fellows looking over their shoulder. How are you spending this money, etc., etc. I've served in Africa. I still do. They used to tell me how sick they were of all these guys imposing their conditions. Along comes China and says, buddy, you want a credit card? No due diligence, no nothing. Take it, spend it. And then these fellows say, well, what happens if I'm not able to repay? Oh, we'll talk about that later. And that later is now the policy. We give you a loan, you give us the land. So these are the 2 issues that are bothering people across Central Asia. Nobody has ever accused the Chinese of being intelligent. Tajikistan is landlocked, 10 million population, 145,000 square kilometers. And despite being 99% Muslim, their ability to imbibe vodka, if I may say so, is quite amazing. When I was last there, they hosted a party for me. And I said, doesn't your religion say anything about it? They said, Ambassador, this is our spiritual sustenance, whatever that means. I mean, they were imbibing spirit. So what I'm trying to say, sir, there's a very strong secular feeling. Muslims, they don't like the Chinese because of what the Chinese are doing to the Uyghurs and the Kazakhs. As you rightly mentioned, they took away 10% of Tajik territory. Now they want 50%. Soon they'll want the entire thing. No, that's not how it's going to happen. Why does China want it? And I'm sure General and Mr. Peer and Ms. Basu will tell you this. Because the old Silk Route, when it went west from China, it traveled through Central Asia. The 5 stans of the former Soviet Union and Afghanistan. I mean, these are the people who felt the first wave of globalization. There was Chinese jade and silk and all the other stuff going west, and gold, which is what the Chinese love even today, precious metals and ivory going east. So this was really the heart of the Silk Route, not Pakistan. CPC is all rubbish. This was really the old Silk Route, and this is what the new BRI is going to be. That is why they are determined, the Chinese, seeing that the whole world is now against them. There is xenophobia growing, including in Central Asia. They want to gobble up this territory so that there is no problem for them as far as this magnificent delusion called the Belt and Road Initiative is concerned.
Right. And General Asthana, Russia has said that they're keeping a close eye on these developments. Is that going to be enough? Because Russia is definitely going to be irked. They have developed this new camaraderie with China. Is this going to be a bump on the way to that?
Certainly. Actually, if you see, as far as whatever historian has said, it is a strategic disaster if China pursues it. Because it is an adventurism into erstwhile USSR. It's not only Tajikistan. Pamir ranges, they don't only go to Tajikistan, they also span to other CAR countries. Now, second important thing is, there is a theory which not very many people know about it. We talked of Tibet being a palm and 5 fingers. It is Xinjiang being a palm, and the 5 fingers are 5 CAR states. And therefore, and which includes Afghanistan, the 5th finger is Afghanistan. Now, in this particular case, let me tell you a little bit about background of Russia and China. It is an unholy alliance because of economics and because of the common foe that is United States. But as far as USSR is concerned, when it was imperialism, the entire Uyghur Muslims were being supported, and that even terrorism was being supported by USSR till the time the Chinese Communist Party came into power. That's the only time the Russians stopped. Russians are quite sensitive to this territory. And secondly, with Vladimir Putin getting an extension till 2036, I think a strong Putin certainly is not going to it cannot be a walkover just like that. CAR is crucial to Russia, it's crucial to Russian influence, and therefore it is a hard nut to crack. And if you exclude Russia, then basically China is fighting the entire world with 5 bankrupt countries or 4 bankrupt countries. Now, that is not a strategic equation. I am very sure that the Chinese strategists will certainly advise their leadership on that score. Next point is, it's not only the Pamir ranges. After the Pamir ranges, you have a valley. Now, the valley expands into 3 countries. And that is the place where all resources are. That is the place where population is. That is the place where gold mines are. So therefore, China is looking to that place. If the Belt and Road Initiative, what Ambassador brought out, has to pass through, then it is that area which it has to pass through. And therefore, it is not only the 50% of Tajikistan, it is subsequently the greed will increase further. So therefore, it is, if you see in the overall context, it's absolutely a strategic disaster if they actually fall for it. So that's why the Russians are saying we will wait and see whether it is a historian's claim or actually Chinese leadership is trying to push it through down the Russians' throat.
Joyita, Tajikistan has once again offered help in exchange for Beijing gaining significant shares of the small mountainous region, these Pamir Mountains. And this is exactly a blueprint of what they perhaps have been doing in other countries as well, be it Sri Lanka, now Nepal, and earlier on Pakistan.
Well, this is what China has been doing with all its neighbors, and in fact, not even neighbors. I mean, China is kind of, anything that could have happened in history is now basically, it's alive. I mean, history is alive as far as China is concerned. And for that matter, history could be spurious history also, and that is how it has been functioning. So everything, each and every territory that, with Tajikistan, they're talking about 150-year-old, when it happened, the treaty that happened between Russia and China at that time. But in the case of India, they have been talking about, centuries old history. I mean, that is how they use and misuse history, or sometimes, as I said, spurious history. So and this is the same pattern, as my co-panelist talked about, the BRI will be going through that place. And I mean, the gold mines are there. But having said that, let us see how this impacts Russia-China relationship. Because this is the area that is Russia's backyard. And when you're looking at it, I mean, an expansionist China will not even care about Russia. I mean, even though Russia is in China's pocket right now, in spite of that, what Russia does, it has to be seen, because right now, and this is how, China goes around making enemies. But Russia is unlikely to be a vassal state. I mean, even though it is in not good shape right now, but it is unlikely to be a vassal state. I mean, Vladimir Putin is a strong man, too much of a strong man for that. So this is an interesting development that one will have to watch out for.
Sumit, the ultimate agenda of these annexations, if we can call them, by China, seem to be to control this geopolitical area. And in fact, China does want to, in fact, have a military base across Central Asia. If this is the larger agenda that China is pursuing, it's a cause of worry, especially for us.
Very good evening. Well, the point here is, if you look at what has been happening in the Tajikistan, quite a few facts. You see what Ambassador Sareli pointed out: 9 million population, majority Muslim, still a secular state. And there's one more problem: the GDP is only $8 billion, and they have a Chinese debt of $4 billion. So more than 50% of their GDP is Chinese debt, and minus another 4 billion from somewhere else. So the Kazakhs are a very small population with a very big land and a very small GDP and a very big debt. Compare them with Nepal. Nepal has a GDP of $30 billion. So you can do a comparison. How much of land do they hold? What is the population and what is the debt? So the things are not very good, and this debt is primarily with China. That is why they gave these 1,100 square kilometers as an agreement to China in 2011. But now what China is claiming is 45% of the land. This mountain range is, when we are talking about, is 45% of the land. That means almost half of the country. And incidentally, let me remind you, Vineet, that PLA is already guarding that 1,100 square kilometers, which they are already annexed. So if you look at the defense of Tajikistan, they have no defense. PLA is already inside those 1,100 square kilometers, which they have given to China. Now, what adds more to the problems is now, when you look at it from a Russian perspective, now Russia is very worried because Central Asian countries, Arctic countries, and Arctic Ocean is what Russia considers as its exclusive sphere of influence. Any infringement there by anybody will be seen as a very, very disturbing signal to the Russia. Remind you, Vineet, what does the Red Star, the official military magazine of Russia, say? He said any ballistic missile attack on the Russian sphere of influence will be retaliated with a nuclear attack. Obviously, there are two people who are recipients of this. You might argue USA, but with US, there are no military stances happening. There is no diplomatic stances here happening. This is a very, very strong message to China. Do not come into my backyard, because Russia has huge interest in the Arctic Ocean. And incidentally, China has announced a polar Silk Road, which passes through the Arctic. So Russia is seeing what are the Chinese moves about, what China is planning around Russia, and it has to guard its territory. We need one important point. I've been always saying on your show, Russia and China can never come close because they have a lot of axe to grind. Admits being dependent on weapon sales. Recently, Russia stopped the sale of S-400 to China. They have stopped the share of S-400 to China. Russian news agency TASS is on record saying last 17 years there have been more than 500 incidences of their IPR being copied by Chinese. And this Valery Makito, he was caught spying for China and giving them the papers. Now he is kind of in a Russian prison. So these are the facts that have happened in the last few months. Now, important question, why is Xi Jinping doing this? Only one answer, Vineet. Xi wants a victory. He has lost goodwill, he has lost trade, he has lost repute, he has lost trust vis-a-vis the whole world community. He cannot expand vis-a-vis India because India has put a spanner in his wheel of global ambitions. Now you look at these four countries like Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, they are the low-hanging fruit, almost in his lap. So what he is trying to draw home is a victory. Get a piece of land and say, look, this is what we have achieved. We might have lost this. We must have lost the whole world, but we got a basket of, white bread. That is what this whole is about. Let me get home a piece of victory. That is what Xi Jinping wants. And incidentally, these four chaps are, very highly vulnerable. But the good news is that the Russia has already stepped in. You can see visible, tangible things coming from Russia, and Vladimir Putin is not going to take it lighted up. You cannot enter in his backyard.
Okay, absolutely. And Ambassador Vora, do you think these territorial ambitions that China is harboring at this point in time are certainly going to backfire? Tajikistan has, the majority of the population is Muslim. They perhaps know how China treats its Muslims.
They're very concerned about this, as you rightly said. They know what's happening to the Kazakhs and the Uyghurs who are in the Xinjiang region, and Mr. Sumit put it across very correctly that they are upset about it. That's a very volatile mixture. When I was there last in Dushanbe, and I was hosted to dinner by some very high-ranking people, we talked about their president, Ramon, who's been around, Emomali Ramon, has been around, I think, now for 28 years. Although it's a unitary system and supposedly secular, etc., there's no one who can challenge him. Then they talked about something, sir, which is a new factor, which I had not thought about earlier, which is Islamic terrorism. They said, we are ripe for this. 5 years ago, the head of their anti-terrorism force actually defected to the Islamic State. So they're extremely concerned about this and trying to see how they can control the spread of Islamic terrorism with 30% unemployment amongst their youth. No question about it. China's gambit of land in repayment of loans is not going to work. 2 years ago, I think it was the Dushanbe power plant that had to be remodeled, modernized, and had to be retrofitted. They couldn't pay the $300 or whatever it was that they had taken from China. So they grabbed one of their gold mines. And the people I was with said, look, we are going to get those gold mines back from the Chinese. This is not how you behave. So well, this is how the Chinese behave. Nobody else might want to. But Mr. Peet and General were absolutely right. So is Ms. Basu, that this time China should back off. Otherwise, it's going to get clobbered.
General Stana, do you think that Russia is actually going to, in fact, have a problem with China on this? Because they are going to take advantage of the waning power of the United States and both collectively perhaps want to dominate Central Asia now.
Yes, if you see the Russian actions, when there was an incident of Vladivostok, they reacted to some extent. But when China talked about the Arctic route, now in Arctic, Russia had 3 bases. They have now made it to 15 or I think 17 bases to ensure that anybody and everybody, if he has to go to Arctic, it has to be Russian influence. It's something like taking permission from Russia. So when they found that China is looking towards that side, they have played their cards in that manner. Similarly, when it comes to the CAR, they are not going to give a walkover. Certainly not. So I think what China tries is, he catches hold of a weak neighbor and says that, okay, nobody else should enter and I will deal with it bilaterally. Now, this is the methodology which they adopt to put pressure on a smaller neighbor or on a weak neighbor. Now, this is strategically not viable for the reason because there are certain sentimental values. In Pamirna, there is a Mount Lenin and there is Mount Communist. Now, both are very closely linked to USSR. Now, so therefore, the USSR footprints are certainly there. And even going back to that historian may have claimed 100 some years back that, okay, it was ours. But as far as Russians are concerned, it was theirs in a very near future. So the Russians' claim on this region is certainly much more than Chinese. And therefore, as of now, they are all sovereign countries. And I don't think any sane country in the world should be laying claim on a sovereign country. But China does. And China is doing it. And people will have to call it out. And certainly, Russia is the first one which is a major stakeholder. And we will have to wait and see. And it will be interesting to see as to how Russia reacts in case they make any progress like that. If it remains at a historian's narrative level, then it may be a slightly different issue.
Jyota, do you think that if the United States exercised more influence, or rather was a major player in this region, which they are not, China would have not dared to do what they did?
Yes, I think that is definitely the case. But having said that, let us also not forget what is going on in, say, in the Middle East, in particular, around, say, Syria and all. There also basically a proxy war being, I mean, somewhat of a proxy war is being fought between US and US and on the one side, and then Russia and China on the other. So at the same time, so basically what we are looking at is some sort of a G2 world where, that is what China is aiming for. When I'm talking about a G2 world, I'm talking about a US versus China world. You are either with us or you're with them. The thing is, you see now that where does Russia stand? Currently, of course, Russia stands with China, but there is also talk, there is already talk in the US that if Trump comes back, will he be able to bring Russia to the US corner? Well, that is a different thing to say. But you see, if China thinks that its time has come, Russia is also a great power which is now licking its wounds. So let us not write off Russia as well. So it has to be seen, that is why, it's very important. A whole lot of other things are also related to it in terms of which way the US election goes, what sort of a result the US election throws up, because there's always already some speculation about Russia wanting Trump to come back, while China wants Joe Biden to come back. So all these things are very much all related, and we will have to see. I think November will give us an idea about which way the next stage of geopolitics is headed.
Absolutely. Well, it's not going to give us an idea alone. It will tell us who the next US president is going to be. And Sumit, do you think that under Barack Obama as well, the American policy was sort of drifting away from Europe and Asia, and China perhaps saw an opportunity to expand its influence in Eurasia?
I think we need President Trump is on record saying it's only in last 10 years under the Obama where the Chinese have really flourished in America. They got all the money. Look at the Chinese economy numbers 8 years back and look at after the tenure of Obama. You can see a spike like this. Look at their trade deficit with years.
Correct.
It's a spike like this because the numbers say Obama literally gives them a free run. He was literally their brand ambassador saying, let's go to China. Democrats were literally saying, let's go to China. That's how US ended up with a 600 billion trade deficit with them. And instantly, the American money is used now to kill American interests and to dominate America. That is what, unfortunately, the Democrats have done. They did not realize that what kind of a Frankenstein they have created when they created China, when they brought China to such a level. They had this illusions that, they become democratic, they will have more money, this communism will go, democracy will prevail. But it doesn't happen in there because these communist leaders are the feudal lords of China. They want this communist feudalism never to go. And incidentally, coming back to the Russia, there are a couple of points I want to make. There are 4 or 5 contentious points which Russia is very worried about. First of all is this Western, so-called the formal USSR countries, which Russia still thinks has an exclusive sphere of influence with Arctic countries and the Arctic Ocean. Then the second contentious point which has come up is this polar Silk Road going through Arctic, which Russia is definitely not comfortable. And one important thing we need, 1884, the Chinese historian says in 1884, this Pamir region was a part of, China. Now, incidentally, in 1884 to 1991, then when they were Russia, where you were hallucinating, you were on opium, or did you forget it? Or you did not dare, as long as these countries were under Russia, to even open your mouth. It's only after 1991 the Russia and USSR has broken up. Now these countries are small, they are vulnerable. Now suddenly your historians have come up from that 100 year of sleep, precisely 110 year of sleep, and now are claiming the land. By that logic, we need 15 countries have broken away from India. If I go to 1884, then half of the world is Indian. So what are you talking about? Then half of the Asia is Indian. We go up to Kabul, Kandahar, and we go to Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, everything was India. So if you go about those absurd logic, this doesn't hold well. And as far as the influence of USA is concerned, sir, USA on record, I think 5-6 years back, they said we have 600 overseas bases. And with our allies, we have 1,000 overseas bases. And to best of my knowledge, China does not have more than 20 known, unknown, quote unquote. So if you want to increase one more base in South Asia, that is not going to change a lot with,
No, but it's not only, Sumit, it's not only about increasing just one more base. Ambassador Vora, Russia has positioned itself for decades now as the external security guarantor, if we can call it, in Central Asia. Do you think that is starting to dither, that is starting to change, and China is hell bent on taking up that position?
The CIS and the initial talk about the security constellation with Russia at its center still remains. Ultimately, remember that the people who are in power in the five stans are those who are apparatchiks of the former Soviet Union. They still remember the good old Soviet days. This is not the first time that China has claimed land, what they're claiming about the Pamirs. Last year, some Communist Party linked websites, social media accounts had said that the Kazakhs want to come back to China because they belong to us. And then they had said something similar about the Kyrgyz. So in Kyrgyzstan, the capital Bishkek, there were the largest anti-BRI demonstrations in living memory. They burned down a gold processing plant, etc. And the Kyrgyz said something very interesting. They said, stop these Chinese fellows from coming into our country because they've married 30,000 of our women since they can't find them in their own country. So you should ban this kind of interracial marriage, etc. There are several strands to it, but as Mr. Peer said and as General have said, this is Russia's quote-unquote near abroad. This is their sphere. This is where they have felt that they became a world power because of the Soviet Union. And I think a person like Mr. Putin, whom I have met on more than one occasion, is determined to recover that glory of the Russian Empire and of the Soviet Union. So make no mistake about it. The Soviet Union imploded, massive military strength, weak economy. He doesn't want to make that mistake. China is making that mistake. As they say, la plus ça change, la plus c'est la même. The more it changes, the more it is the same. The march of folly continues. The latest evidence is a country called China and a gentleman called Xi Jinping.
Absolutely. Well articulated, sir. General Asthana, with the United States withdrawing from the region, especially from Afghanistan, do you think that this destabilization in the country of Afghanistan is also a cause of worry, especially Xinjiang and China? There's in fact role and perhaps show off their power in the region now.
Certainly, as far as US has its own compulsion to withdraw from Afghanistan because it's been a very long, I think 19 years of war, and it was one of the election promise. Although there were disagreements between the generals and the politicians on that, General Mattis was not in favor of withdrawing from Afghanistan. That's number one. The second thing is, even in United States, the strategists are thinking slightly differently. You would have heard that now the President Donald Trump wants to meet the Iraqi president because he thinks that he is favorable to USA and therefore USA wants to be in Iraq as well. Secondly, there is also a talk that we should revisit the sanction policy against Russia because any fissure between China and Russia will be exploited by US. And they are looking on that direction that could there be a fissure. So when all options are open in this game, I would say in this strategic game, then USA is also going to play its card. Certainly, USA withdrawal from Afghanistan is loss of a very crucial strategic space, and it did give some advantage to China in a manner that they have struck a deal with Iran, and they will be able to perhaps reroute their CPEC through Afghanistan in case Baluchis create too much of problems. So that's and get a warm water access. So that's the advantage which perhaps they will have. But there is a catch there, and that's why I keep harping to all the diplomats that please do some smart diplomacy. We must do business with Iran, and we must convince USA that it is in their interest that we get an access to Afghanistan. Because if we don't have an access, if India doesn't have an access to Afghanistan, they are losing a strategic space which is crucial to them. And their major reason, the major worry which they were to address and why they came to Afghanistan was no terrorist groups would become strong enough to hit their mainland. Now ISIS is getting stronger and Al-Qaeda is also getting stronger. And therefore, if this strategic space is lost, that situation may come up again. And therefore, this is what we have to convince them and get in. Start doing business with Iran as well.
Sumit, just half a minute left and then we take a break. Do you think how Russia will in fact respond to this annexation attempt by China is going to be very closely monitored by India as well? Because we have also had certain expectations from Russia, especially when it comes to China.
I think we need Russia. If you look at, nothing comes out in Russian newspapers and official, military magazines without editing. Now, TASS reporting this China stealing their designs. Now, Red starts saying that any ballistic missile attack will be retaliated with a nuclear missile attack. And incidentally, Russia is also exploring its influence in Indo-Pacific. They are exploring seriously with India this Vladivostok and Chennai Siru. That is the latest development. And most important, now, with this kind of economy, they have suspended their S-400 sales to China. And they have given us, Sukhois, they have given us arms, they have given us ammunition. Whatever we expected from Russia, that has come our way. So we already see 4 or 5 visible, tangible steps being taken by, Russia to prove that India is a good old friend, and we can still be good old friends for, centuries to come.
All right. On that note, thank you everyone for being a part of this show.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.